This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by
Initech. You'll love the new cover sheets on our TPS reports, and we're going to need you to go ahead and come in on Saturday. Initech.
and
The letter F. You can't spell friendship without F. And by the way, it's time to admit she only likes you as a friend.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM. Safety contact.
from Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's Dorking Out with Sonia Mansfield and Christopher Allen Smith.
Welcome to episode X4 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories in pop culture that we love. This means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and pretty much everything else that we feel like talking about. With me today is my co-host, professional writer, and author of The Sonia Show, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there.
Hey.
With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
So on today's show, we're going to be looking at how different creators choose to tell the same story. And by this, we're going to look at Ezra Edelman's amazing, I would almost say groundbreaking, O.J. Simpson documentary, O.J. Made in America. We're going to be doing a status check on the latest season of Amy Schumer's comedy sketch show, Inside Amy Schumer. And finally, we're going to be blending an installment of Why Should I Listen to You, that new segment, that News You Could Use segment, where we show our critiquing bona fides by letting you see if our favorite movies are your favorite movies, and if you should even listen to our reviews at all. This week, we're going to be looking at the best and worst of Pixar movies and giving a quick review of Finding Dory. But first, the headline news. There are a lot of headlines coming at us this week. Actually, too many to cram into one podcast without it sounding like a couple of dorks in their garages yammering about everything in pop culture, which you would think that's what this show is, and really that's only 80% of what this show is.
And we're not in the garage.
I am, actually. As a matter of fact, I am.
All right, so 50% of the show is not recorded in a garage.
That's right. In the great podcasting tradition of Mark Maron and
others.
And others. I am actually in my garage recording my half of this show. All right. But yes, first up is one of the things that caught our eye was Chris Pine, the Captain Kirk of the new rebooted Star Trek franchise, gave an interview to SFX magazine where he said, "You can't make Cerebral Star Trek in 2016. It just wouldn't work on today's marketplace. You can hide things in there. Star Trek Into Darkness has crazy, really demanding questions and themes, but you have to hide it under a guise of wham-bam explosions and planets blowing up. It's very, very tricky. The question our movie poses is, does the Federation mean anything?" And that's where he's talking about next month's Star Trek Beyond. But, Sonia, what do you make of Captain Kirk saying that Star Trek can't be cerebral?
I think it's an insult to Trekkies, is what I think. I think what he's
most
saying,
things are.
He's making it sound like we can't be challenging or have anything that's too thought-provoking. We have to dumb it down for you guys and hide it behind explosions and special effects. And I think that's insulting.
Well, you know, this strikes me as one of those interviews where I kind of see where he's coming from. He didn't put it in the best way possible. It's probable that he's interacted with a lot of frustrated Star Trek fans, which for some reason love to beat up on this rebooted offshoot of the Star Trek universe. But I am married to one of those Star Trek fans, by the way. That's right. I actually am one of those Star Trek fans. But I think he can be forgiven because if you look at all the other Star Trek movies, they really are action movies or wannabe action movies. They have a lot more shooting and ships blowing up and stuff exploding and planets melting than any regular episode. So even the original series movies and the Next Generation series movies that, fans like to point at and say, see, Star Trek can be cerebral and thought-provoking and this and that. The movies have never really been that, except for Star Trek the Motion Picture, which was like watching paint dry in slow motion. But, I'm not, there's I think Star Trek fandom, one of their, the knocks against them is they're very difficult and persnickety and hard to please, which I think sometimes is true with certain aspects of it. And I think here, I think they're, I don't want to say he's right, but, the level of questions that they raised in Star Trek Into Darkness, which is a deeply flawed film.
That's an understatement.
Is they did raise, like, how far can you go in war? How far are you willing to go before you start going against the thing that you're supposed to be protecting with your military might? How much around the rules can you go? So I think they did have some questions in there. It kind of got lost in convoluted plotting and just bizarre motivations of some of the people. But, I would put the quote-unquote message of Into Darkness up against most of the other Star Trek movies. I mean, if you put Star Trek First Contact up beside Star Trek Into Darkness, I would say Star Trek Into Darkness has more ideas in it.
I can't even remember the message. All I can remember is that they basically tried to turn Spock into Jason Bourne, and he was like this crazy action star. And that just doesn't seem like Spock to me.
That's true. That is true.
I also remember my husband freaking out in the movie, like rocking back and forth in his chair.
It's funny. I just went to a party this weekend where they were talking about that, and there were similar reactions. I had a friend of mine who is going to be on this show, and you know who you are, talking about his reaction to Into Darkness, and he was in a similar state. I, however, was not. I was like, oh, this is, I wish they weren't doing Khan, and I wish they weren't doing Thing, and it's this weird mirror version of the Wrath of Khan, and that's kind of interesting, I guess, from this kind of cerebral storytelling stunt perspective.
It's not cerebral.
But, what I mean
Can't
is
be
just...
too cerebral.
No, but what I mean is Cerebral is a kind of like a screenwriter sitting down, and I wonder what it would be like to make a mirror version of this movie I love. And then they go through it. But, like I was saying earlier, if you look at the motivations of the bad guy Admiral or Khan or Kirk in those movies, one little scratch beneath the surface, or one, as soon as you're walking out of the studio or the screening and you go, you know what, why did they do that? And, well, if they did that, then that would have meant there would be some point where they were doing this, and that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, that movie evaporates much more than most movies out there. So, that is what Chris Pine said. Those are our overlong and significant thoughts on him yammering.
We gave some very cerebral answers to his mocking of cerebral movies.
That's right. And what's the word of this week, Sonia?
Cerebral.
No.
Friend?
No.
What is the word of the week?
Azure. That's the word of the week. I don't know why you're on the cerebral kick. All right, that's enough of me. But enough out of me. So the next, speaking of managing fan expectations, the next story comes to us. The Walking Dead is apparently filming multiple openings of the 7th season.
Is it really the 7th season? Wow.
Apparently.
Okay.
I ejected after season 2. So
yeah, I think I made it to 4 or 5.
That's right. My wife made it to 4 or 5, but then we were out. Or then she ejected.
I wonder if we left at the same time.
That's right. So anyway, at the end of season 6, there was a controversial and horrible battening of somebody with a bat. And it apparently pissed off a lot of fans, made people really unhappy, and they are opening season 7, or at least the production, by shooting multiple red herring deaths of who gets killed, I guess to keep the secret under wraps of who dies. Who dies is apparently laid out in the Walking Dead comic book for all to see, so the mystery might not be all that spectacular. But, given the fan pushback, it was one of those weird weird situations of the modern age where I don't watch this show, I'm not paying attention to this show, and then the day that show aired, or the day after that show aired, it was like, wow, a lot of people are pissed off about The Walking Dead from last night. You can, hear the thunderclap ripple across the internet, even though you and I haven't been paying attention to this show for 3 or 4 years. So what do you make of shooting multiple openings to keep the...
I guess that's a good idea. I think it's been done many times. Didn't Dallas do that to hide who shot JR?
I think they did. And also, if I remember correctly, I think the Simpsons actually animated several versions of the revelation of who shot Mr. Burns.
And any of those might have been a better one.
Yeah, they all. That's the thing is with the Simpsons, and now we go off on a tangent. We're gonna need some music for going off on tangents. Now,
it'll be like the Benny Hill music.
That's right. With the Simpsons, it was just like, well, what's the funniest outcome? What's the funniest whatever? You had all those people over that summer after Mr. Burns got shot trying to figure it out, and I think there was some contest.
God, they took it so seriously.
Figure out who shot Mr. Burns, when in fact it's just, well, if you think like a comedian, who would be funniest to shoot Mr. Burns?
Tito Puente.
Actually, all right, you're right. I was going to say a little kid, but when you say Tito Puente, yeah, you know what?
It's because it's just really fun to say, right?
That's right. I miss Tito Puente. I've listened to probably 5 songs of his, but when he died, it was in a top line of his obituary. He was in Who Shot Mr. Burns, and it was sad to see. So, yeah, I guess it's just weird that the PR perspective of a show is dictating how they're shooting or how they're moving into production.
I think it's so sad that people are so desperate to spoil the show for themselves
that's true,
that there's
too.
like a paparazzi out there trying to get pictures of who it is.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. It's like, just wait for the show. That's why you like the show, right? You wait and you watch it. I don't understand the people that want to spoil things for themselves.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is there's definitely...
Also, they could just read the comic.
That's right. There's definitely a cohort of people out there that they want to... Actually, one of the cohorts of people out there is my wife, who doesn't like suspense, really doesn't like suspense, and she would just be happier if you would tell her how it ends, and then she gets to watch it without the tension. She's just... That's her... But then you have a lot of people out there that like to find out the story so they can go out and spoil it for other people, which is an awesome aspect of life in 2016. Thank you, internet trolls everywhere. And with that, we are going to say and remind you that we have a whole lot more headlines in our newsletter of stuff that we didn't talk about today. One of them being, we would like to mention the unfortunate passing, speaking of Star Trek, of Anton Yelchin, who died yesterday in a sadly strange car accident.
That was very sad.
Then there's also my favorite. Roland Emmerich says he waited to make Independence Day Resurgence so special effects could match his vision. His vision of world monuments blowing up. He might think that it sounds arty and all that stuff, and I got to say I am very appreciative to Roland Emmerich because his success paid for several years of my journalism. We will tell that story on another edition of this podcast. But I got to tell you, Mr. Emmerich, that setting the bar of expectation that high for Independence Day resurgence might not pay off the way that you're expecting. So yeah,
Quiet. Don't try to put down the Independence Day universe that
I'm
he's
not
trying to create with his vision.
You know what? Here's the thing: is one of these days we are going to have a bad movies we love segment.
Oh yeah,
and
please.
At the top of the list, pegged to the top, is going to be Independence Day. Right there, that movie is so much damn fun, and it is so just perfectly pitched. That movie,
I can't wait for that segment.
Good.
So that I could talk about how much I love the Cannonball Run movies.
Want more dorking out with Chris and Sonia? Well, there are a few simple things you can do. Share this program with a friend. We're assuming you have friends. It's easy. Just go to dorkingoutshow.com and you'll find our podcast links, our SoundCloud account, our YouTube links, our Facebook links, our Twitter links, our Tumblr links, and all our other links. And links. Grab one of those links and get to sharing. The more people listen, the more we make. Make all your friends envious with the cool podcasting choices you've made as a modern trendsetter. Our audience research shows the Dorking Out Show podcast audience is the smartest, most attractive, least prone to baseless flattery in the entire podcasting world. So get those links and get to sharing. Now, on with the show. So, topic 1, O.J. Simpson, Made in America, a new 30 for 30, 5-part, 7-hour, 30 for 30 documentary.
Yep.
Came out. This is coming out months after the much lauded pop culture enthused O.J. Simpson.
The People versus O.J. Simpson.
The People versus O.J. Simpson on FX.
American Crime Story.
American Crime Story. It's almost as though I remembered nothing of that. Thank you, Sonia. This documentary. Well, actually, Sonia, let me ask you first. What did you think of this documentary, Ezra Edelman's series here?
I thought it was so great. I honestly went in thinking, well, I just watched, The People versus O.J. Simpson, so I didn't think that this one would tell me anything I didn't already know. I mean, the case has been covered so exhaustively, and it's been so well documented that I wondered if it would have anything new to tell me, and it really did. I learned a lot. It's really, really good stuff and well worth 7 hours of your time.
What was the new stuff that came to mind?
Well, there's a few things. The first thing being, I didn't really know how famous of an athlete OJ was. To me, OJ Simpson was just, he was a football player, and then he was in those Naked Gun movies, and then he murdered some people, and that's how he was famous to me. I didn't even remember the Hertz commercials that he made.
Right.
So this was really eye-opening to me. It showed me really what an amazing athlete he was, and how loved he was, and how he was. I mean, he was like the Michael Jordan of his time. He was in everything. He, the face of Hertz and all kinds of advertising, and I just had no idea. And I also didn't know the extent to which the Black community really hated the LAPD.
Yeah, that was...
I knew of it.
Right.
I knew it on a very surface level.
Yeah. You knew the fact, but you didn't know the depth.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to say, and, I'll get into my thoughts in a minute, but I think you're right about the Michael Jordan thing, is that, now we think of OJ as this murderer, as this horrible person who did this thing, but back then it was as shocking as, what if Michael Jordan murdered somebody?
Right.
Or, what if LeBron James just murdered somebody? It's somebody of massive, legendary, Hall of Fame, first ballot, not just some football player who had a couple good years. This was, people still talk about him as potentially, the best one or two or third running back in the NFL of all time. So this is this is Joe Montana murdering somebody. But it's looking back on it, it's hard to believe how nuts this was. But back to the documentary, for me, I got to say, one of the things that got me into filmmaking kind of as an adult, one of the things that got me in as a kid was like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Back to the Future, those kinds of movies. And then when I got out of high school and was going into college, one of the other filmmakers that was kind of influential to me at that point was Ken Burns and his, I think it was 11-hour Civil War series. It might have been 9-hour Civil War series, which is just I think the greatest documentary ever made on any subject. But I got to say, O.J. Made in America might be a strong number 2.
That's really high praise.
It is. That's right. It is. No, it's awesome. Because what he did was he takes, he starts the story that we supposedly all know so well, and supposedly we're all so sick of because we had to live through the trial, or we've heard for years about OJ killing people and the stories on the internet and all this stuff. Is he starts that story that everybody thinks they know and was saturated in the 90s, and starts back in, I think, the 50s, and tells the whole story of how the LAPD dealt with African Americans in LA. It was essentially, the South gets a lot of guff for everything that they did, rightly so, but it is amazing how California and the North don't get nearly as much heartache or guilt, collective guilt, for the things that our institutions, speaking as a Californian, did to African Americans. And watching him tell the story of where that all came from, how the LAPD was used to keep African Americans in their neighborhoods and keep a boot on their neck the whole time. And, then it goes to OJ, and then it goes to, his post-football career. So by the time... Then it goes to his relationship with Nicole. So by the time you get to this place where there's this awful trial and this supposedly on its surface crazy verdict, you completely understand and empathize to some extent with every single person inside and outside of that courtroom. You know where where you're coming from with the jury, whose decision seems crazy to a lot of people. You know where you're coming from and what the people are thinking and feeling and why they're acting as the defense. You know the heartbreak and the stress of the prosecution. You know why the people outside are cheering when OJ is acquitted. It's just amazing the million themes that trial touches on. He explains every single one and makes them completely understandable. And it's just, I guess part of the reason that the Ken Burns thing comes up is, the themes of the Civil War touch on the themes of everything in American life. In fact, now that I'm talking it through with you, it would be really interesting to watch those two back to back. The history of race and what race has meant and violence in America and the Civil War and trying to slough off stuff from the past. And, and then a lot of the same themes are really strongly held in this. And in a sense, there were moments where I was kind of empathizing with OJ in a way that I think would probably make a lot of African Americans not too thrilled with me. But, all this crazy stuff is going on in the 60s. He's this poor kid from San Francisco. He gets this scholarship to play football, and, a lot of African-American leaders and athletes of the day are leaning hard on him to make certain choices and do certain things, and he just wants to not deal with it. He wants to not think about it. He wants to go to school like kind of white kids do, not having to worry about stuff they don't feel like worrying about. And, you know, being pushed and pulled in that million different directions and having pressure put on you from the black community because of the color of his skin would just be really tough. But also completely kind of, you know, it is kind of horrible, the choices that he made in not standing up for certain things at certain points. And then the murder.
Oh, and that. Well, what I think is just so commendable about this documentary, what's so amazing about it, first, it's 7 hours long, and it starts really big, really wide. Yeah. And it just gets, the story gets a little smaller and a little smaller, you know, with each episode till it kind of just like comes together at the murder trial. Yeah. And on top of all that, we're talking about something not scripted. It's not like they could sit down and like write the story that they wanted to tell. Yeah. They had to interview all these people. They had to find all the footage that they need. Yes. And cut it in a way. Yes. So that it's telling the story. And that's what blows my mind. Like, yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm going to jump in on here real quick. The amount of footage that they have and the places, the bits of footage that they got from certain areas is insane. It is better than any documentary I've seen. Yeah. There is footage from places you would never imagine in a million years they would be able to get footage. You know, one of the things would be after OJ came home after the trial and goes in his house and has a little party and everything, there's footage of him in his house going through that party. It's almost as though Ezra Edelman had a time machine and could figure out, all right, we're going to need footage from here, 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 and here. I want you to, you know, in a Stephen King 11/22/63 kind of way, I'm going to send 5 camera guys back. They're going to live in the 90s and in the 80s and in the 70s. They're going to get to be friends with everybody, so they're going to be in the right place at the right time to get the footage. It's just nuts.
And the people, he got to sit down and talk to him. Yeah. I'm like, you know, he couldn't get Chris Darden, but, you know, he did get Marcia Clark. He does get Mark Furman. Yeah. He gets a lot of these, like, older, you know, rich white friends of OJ's. Yeah. To talk to them and be pretty honest. Yeah. And about what happened, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, and he got, you know, friends of OJ from growing up to be in it, and it's just, and what's doubly amazing. So that's all, you know, it explains all this stuff and it touches on all the things, but then he also gets people like Mark Furman and Marcia Clark and other people to kind of admit to things that were only hinted at in all the coverage of the trial. He got Mark Furman to actually talk about how people, you know, Rodney King got beat up the way he got beat up because they took out the chokehold, and he's just staring right into the camera and just kind of admitting it and saying it in this horrible way. It's like you can see his racism and you can see his myopia just staring you right at in the face. It's like, I think Mark Furman, like a lot of people who feel the way he does about different races, spends most of his time hiding it and being clever and being quiet about certain things. Mm-hmm. But he just, you know, he blames the Rodney King, the whole Rodney King trial, the whole Rodney King incident on the fact that police officers couldn't strangle guys anymore. Yeah. Which is just bizarre.
Damn it, PC police.
Exactly. And then
we can't chokehold people anymore.
That's right. And then, you know, and they had 2 interviews with jurors who, one of which is kind of the stereotypical bad example of what everybody thinks of in a cartoon version of the OJ jury. Which I think is, they're not taking it seriously. They're not paying attention to the details. They're just, F the police. This is payback for Rodney King, which one of the jurors literally says. And then the other juror, who is very thoughtful and very clear and did think about everything. Actually, that's one thing. I'm kind of rambling here. I'm sorry, but that's one of the things that was amazing is throughout the trial, it's just, they just came back in 4 hours. How could you possibly go for years, for like a year and a half in this trial and then examine all that evidence and render a verdict in 4 hours? It's impossible. Gil Garcetti, who was the DA at the time, basically said these people didn't pay attention to anything. And then there's the one juror that said, well, yeah, in a normal trial, it's 1 day of deliberation for 1 week of testimony. But every day after trial, we had to go back to our hotel room, stay alone in our hotel room with nothing, no TV to watch, nothing to read, nothing to think about, except this trial. So basically, they kind of got all their deliberating done after hours. So they had thought everything through, the ones that were thinking stuff through, by the time they had to render the verdict. So you could do it in 4 hours, and it kind of makes sense from the juror's perspective of what they had to live through. Spending that amount of time on it makes total sense, which was shocking to me. But
I think if this case happened now, the verdict would be guilty because everyone understands DNA evidence now.
Yeah.
It would be a much different verdict now.
Yeah.
And they still might come back after 4 hours, but it would be a different verdict.
I would say yes. You're probably right. People understand DNA.
Maybe they would still believe that the LAPD would plant evidence. But
yeah. Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing that's funny watching this movie now is there are a lot of rumors and there are a lot of activists back in the 80s and 90s saying, the police plant evidence, they frame people, and they do this, they do that, and they, there was a lot of talk about it, but in the intervening 20 years, we've seen a lot of proven examples of it happening.
Yeah.
And, people bitch and moan about the jury and everything, but Mark Fuhrman was one of the star witnesses, and he is also on tape talking about how cops frame black people, how they plant evidence, how they're gods that are able to kill people at will if they want to and get away with it. Like every, activist stereotype of how police work, he spit everyone out of his mouth. And, that's the thing is if you want to be fair-minded, and I mean, it's obvious that OJ did it in kind of a larger truth kind of way. But if you're in that jury box and you're confronted with Mark Fuhrman sitting on the stand saying, is it reasonable, given this man and what he's done and what he's admitted to, is it reasonable to think that this guy might have played around with stuff?
In this day and age where we have documentaries like Paradise Lost and Making a Murderer, it's easier to believe that maybe police would do this sort of thing. I would say it's easier for people like me, I guess.
Was just going to add that.
Lame white people.
That's
it's easier to believe now than it was then. However, I still think, DNA is DNA and that's science.
True. But yeah, and it's that is the thing. It's definitely true that that Marcia Clark laid out, and I don't know if she actually did this in the trial. I kind of wish she did. She lays out why it literally was impossible for Fuhrman to actually plant the glove. But that's the thing that's amazing about this documentary is it tells you what would a reasonable person believe about the LAPD sitting in that jury box.
And, I mean, ultimately, what's so sad about the documentary is there's no justice for the Brown family and for the Goldmans, and how the case was so much bigger than the murder of these two people. Yeah. And my heart was just broken for them. And there was a segment in the documentary where one of the prosecutors describes what he thinks happened at the murder. Yeah. And they cut it with some really gruesome, graphic crime scene photos. It is probably one of the more chilling things I've ever seen. Yeah. Yeah. It's really really horrifying to think about what happened to Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman.
It is. Yeah. It's... Sorry, did I step on you there?
No. And it's... it just shows that, you know, this case is 22 years old, and how things just kind of haven't changed that much.
Yeah.
There's still, the police still have a horrible relationship with the Black community. And here's a woman who was being beaten up by her husband, and they came out like 8 times and they didn't do anything about it. And
yeah.
So it's depressing.
Yeah.
As well.
It is depressing. It is heartbreaking. But I gotta say, as a documentary, this is an amazing window into so many aspects of the American life that it is named perfectly. This is a perfect documentary.
I would have called it Making a Murderer, but I guess that name was already taken.
That's right. So, thank you for taking this horrible situation so seriously, Mansfield.
You're welcome.
All right, and for segment 2, we are doing a status check of Amy Schumer's last season that just ended last week of Inside Amy Schumer on Comedy Central. And with us today is host of Big Ben's Movie Show, host of the Geek Wars podcast, and screenwriter Ben Waddell. Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Hey, what's up?
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
And he is also an aficionado of Saturday Night Live. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were in several improv groups and a stand-up comedian?
I've never done stand-up, actually. No, I'm now currently in my 3rd different improv group.
Right.
But yeah, no, I did improv and sketch here in town for TV, and then did improv down in the Bay Area. But no, I've never done stand-up. It's something to think about.
Cool. And for those of you playing at home, in town will
is
remain
Chico.
a secret. No, you're not supposed to tell them.
In town
damn it.
is where the Fortress of Solitude is. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. From here,
That's not my town, by the
right.
way.
No.
It's
Because this is America, and if you want to live in another town, you can do that.
That's right.
For
All right.
now.
So on to season 4 of Inside Amy Schumer. I, for one, well, actually, you know what, Ben? I'm going to let you, as the guest,
Okay.
and
All right.
the other man on this thing, tell me about Amy Schumer.
Yes, I, as a man, will tell you about Amy Schumer. Even though I'm pretty sure that was one of the sketches this year. Yeah, no, I feel like this year, really since last season, is when the show finally started becoming more of a thing. Basically, because the show had been on for 3 years as of last year, and it opened, last year was kind of the year where the big important things started to happen. She started to get a lot more eyeballs. She won a Peabody Award. She won some Emmys and stuff like that, kind of like Chris. And then, then later on, then that season finished and everybody liked it, and that was the end of it. And then we move on to this season where it's all still there. She's still pushing all the same stuff about, political stuff, woman stuff, sex, all the same Amy Schumer things. But I am hearing that people aren't giving as much of a crap about it. In fact, I actually did a search earlier today, and the first thing was an article that said, "How come we all stopped caring about Amy Schumer?" So,
Ow!
I know
that's
was on
what I want to
Vulture,
hear.
and that was written yesterday.
Ouch!
So,
I was a huge fan too. I thought the 3rd season was so funny, and I loved the movie. I thought Trainwreck was super funny.
Oh, great
and
movie.
then I watched the first episode of Inside Amy Schumer, and I was like, yeah, that's funny. And it was just a victim of there's just too much good television. And I stopped watching thinking, well, people will share the skits that are really good.
Gotcha.
And then nobody was sharing them. And then, Smith is like, by the way, the show's over. What?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, no, I heard that it was over. I don't know for sure if it's like completely done or if it's like coming back later, because I know Key and Peele also ended their run after 4 years.
I think it's been picked up for like 1 or 2 more seasons already.
I gotta say that makes me a little nervous because I think every comedian, and this is kind of my hobby horse, every comedian has a kind of a natural arc where they're kind of young and hungry and raw, but there's real talent there. Then they get polished and like they focus on their work ethic and they just really hit it. Then they go into a lot of rooms, and then they get to a point where just they're humming on all cylinders. And I feel like, you know, for her going on TV and everything, you know, the first 2 seasons of Amy Schumer were good, and they were funny, and there were moments, and there were this, and there were that. But that third season was just amazing. You know, it was like a, you know, ranks up there with Key and Peele or some of the seasons of the Chappelle Show. I mean, it was just amazing. And, you know, I think she did one of those all-time great Pantheon sketches was
12 Angry Men.
12 Angry Men, which was just, oh my God, I don't know if I've laughed harder at a sketch since the Chappelle Show went off the air. And this season, it's like all the same stuff is there, all the same subjects, but it's almost like her tone or her execution is just not quite as sharp, not quite as good, and it's just not. I felt a lot of. I watched Amy Schumer with my wife, and a lot of this season ended with us looking at each other like, "What the hell was that? What's going on here?" You know, one of the ones that was. I remember there's one episode where she becomes president, but then she gets her period, and then everything kind of goes off the rails, and she acts like how stereotypical men would expect a president that, you know, actually I heard this back in the 80s.
She did the joke. She did, I mean, the joke of like, women can't be president. What happens if they get their period and want to bomb everybody? And she was like, all right, let's do that.
But it wasn't exactly. That was the thing. Is it's like on paper, it seemed like this seems like it could be a really good sketch, but in execution, it was a very
it's one joke and done. That's the problem.
Yeah, it was a very strange sensation where it was kind of almost as tone deaf as the chauvinists who would sketch out that scenario would have you believe, and it was just not funny. And there's some, like, she starts to go down these roads to make fun of these certain things, but she's so sharp that she can kind of jot left and jot right and turn when she needs to and really hit the jokes. Like, she thinks you're going down some stereotypical road, and then she'll come at it from the left and really make it funny and really make a nice point on top of it. Mm-hmm. But this season, it's like there's something off. There's something. Sonia, were you able to see that episode?
I watched a couple, and I just felt like it just wasn't very inspired.
Right.
It was almost like it was being phoned in. It was like, these are the jokes we're going to make, and you could see where they were going. I didn't feel like there were any of those crazy turns that you saw in earlier seasons.
Right.
And I'm a big fan.
Right. You know, and that's another thing is the last season she had one of the more famous sketches at Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Last fuckable day, yeah.
Right, which is so funny. It's a funny concept, and the execution was so great, and the lines were so great, so perfect, but it kind of acknowledged her status of where she had gotten in the industry. It acknowledged that she was not just some road comic anymore. She had kind of graduated to this next level of showbiz. But then this season, I think in that same President's episode, there were several sketches where the line was prominent that I'm just like you, I'm normal, I'm this and I'm that, and it was just tone deaf or something. It's almost like, I think Sonia might have it right where it's either phoned in or maybe she's doing too much and the well is starting to run dry. I mean, I think all great sketch shows have that arc where they put out a lot of good stuff, they have a lot of good mixture, and then they just kind of run out of ideas and it just kind of drifts away and bleeds off.
Well, to me, the thing is that you gotta, like, if you have a great year like she had last year, where she did Last Fuckable Day, she did 12 Angry Men, and then I'm actually blanking on a lot of the rest of the stuff from last season.
Yeah.
Because actually, I'm looking at the list of episodes. That was episode 1 and episode 3
Yeah.
But they kind of carried her for the rest of that year.
Yeah.
And then, for this one, stuff that I remember from this year that I really loved, she did a sketch where she goes to her OBGYN and the doctor is then removed and a group of congressmen is brought in and they are now going to be her doctor.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that was great. And that was really funny. And they were like, she's like, shouldn't women be in charge of what happens to women's bodies? And they're like, that would be like letting the lions run the zoo. And they all have a laugh about it. And it's just craziness. And the other ones that really stuck out to me is I'm looking at the episodes and kind of the list. There was a sketch in the second episode that I really loved with Liam Neeson, where he runs a funeral parlor where they don't bury cowards. And
I think I missed that one.
His whole so he's like, can my dad be buried here? And it's like, how did he die? It's like, oh, he was shot in a gang war. We don't bury cowards. And he shows the little 5-year-old boy out of his, kicks him out. And it's really dark and really, so I thought that was really funny. But you're right, the president one was kind of weird. The one that I did think was interesting was, and this was kind of a bit of inside baseball, she did an episode about fame where people kept coming up to her in a restaurant and asking for pictures of her.
Was that the same episode?
That was the same episode as the one where you're talking about, where she's on a luxury airship talking about how normal she is.
That's what it was. Yeah, those two episodes back to back. I think that's, and maybe it's just me and my perception to that one episode, but those two skits back to back where it's like, I'm a regular person and this and that.
It was the whole theme of the episode. Yeah, they were all lined up like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, but that one actually came from a real life situation where several weeks before she got in trouble because a guy in North Carolina wanted to take a picture with her and she said no. And the guy kind of did that sneaky thing where he then turns around and over the shoulder gets a picture of her.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, no, give me your phone and delete that picture. Oh, and wow. And she actually kind of got rough with him and he deleted the picture and then he went online and told everybody about it. And for about a week, everyone was like, Amy Schumer's a bitch and she won't take pictures. And then she makes this episode where everybody's walking up to her and like, hey, can you take a picture with me? And she's like, oh, sure. She's like, hey, would you come home and bang my brother? She's like, no. And it's like, why you got to be stuck up like that? It's like, hey, would you come over to my house and we could be best friends forever? It's like, no. And just that thing of, if I say yes to this, where do I, where's the line that is comfortable? At what line am I a bitch and what line am I just a person trying to get my stuff done? And, she kind of poked fun a little bit of that. And I thought that was really clever that she did that. But, of course, you have to have known that story.
I guess that's true because from where I'm coming from, and this could just be my own myopia about how I like my comedy or how I like is, that is not a super identifiable problem with a lot of people, and it's not something a lot of people can empathize with. So I guess that's
for yourself,
what it is.
Chris. I'm on the front page of the paper.
So that's right. Front page, right.
Being hounded by the paparazzi is the worst, you guys.
Oh yeah, really? one guy that's the paparazzi in our town.
So that we have to invite over.
Yeah.
To get him to pay attention to us. So, which allows us to.
You got to invite him over, and then you got to push him away, and then you got to bring him back. It's such a hassle.
That's right.
So yeah.
So what would you? Are we overblowing it? Is she not kind of losing it? Is she not one of those comedians drifting into irrelevance, or not irrelevance, but drifting into her later stages?
Here's my thing on this. So South Park, when it first came out, was cutting edge, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe a show's doing this. You go 10 years later, South Park was still cutting edge. But go back and watch those first seasons. Yeah, they're boring. I mean, there's nothing special. It's like, yeah, a kid said a bad word. Who cares?
Yeah,
and it's that thing of if you want to do what South Park has been successful in doing for 20 years or whatever, is every year you got to push the envelope a little bit further. And it felt like to me that for this year she pushed the envelope exactly as far as she had pushed it last year.
Well, okay, that's a great example then. Because I think one of the things that sets South Park apart is through those years, every time it pushed the envelope. But as it did that, its number one job was to be funny. So it has been one of the one of the very, very few shows that has lasted as long as it has and been as funny as it has been. You know, it hasn't. I don't think it's had the fall off that The Simpsons had. It hasn't had the fall off that Family Guy has.
Nope.
It hasn't had the fall off of nearly any other show has had. But I definitely think Amy Schumer. Maybe it's just a couple of bad episodes. Maybe it's I haven't seen exhaustively the entire season this season. I thought I'd seen most of it.
And it's not just you though. I mean, the ratings. As I'm looking at the ratings for the episodes. It started off almost, within a point of where last year's finale. So last year's finale ends up with 759,000 people watching. She starts this season with 765, and it drops. It drops all the way throughout the season to two low points, one being episode 5, which was the one where she was with a boy in bed, and she couldn't figure out if he wanted the Madonna or the whore, and she kind of kept going back and forwards. Yeah. That one only got a 501, so that's 50,000 people. And then all the way down to the bottom, the finale actually was the worst rated episode of the whole season.
Interesting.
Well, see, and the finale was just a clip show, right? Where
exactly.
And then
now, the one thing I would say
like sandwiched
amazing
with
title. The title of the clip show was Rubbing Our Clips.
Right.
That's right.
Which is great, and that's very clever and
fun. But like the idea that they were making fun of Real Housewives isn't exactly envelope pushing. It's
no.
Exactly. And I that was thank you, Sonia. That was exactly my reaction. Is all the new material was just like, yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, they're vapid and stupid and self-absorbed. That's the joke. It's What did you think? Is there anything? What do you think, Sonia? I mean, do you think we're just two bloviating dudes? Don't answer too quickly.
I think she came off a really amazing season and a really great movie, and last year was her year, and maybe this year it's just kind of that backlash and kind of a come down. And really, season 3 was so great. Maybe there was just nowhere to go but down.
Yeah, that's
very possible.
That's
I
not
also
a bad
think in the fourth finale they mentioned that her sister Kim is now the head writer for the show. And I'm wondering if she was the head writer last year.
That's a good question.
Because
I don't think she was.
So I'm looking at the 66th Emmy Awards when they won Outstanding Writing for a Series. She's not listed as one of the writers.
That is interesting.
Yeah,
that might answer our questions. Not to besmirch the good sister Schumer, but are we doing too much armchair quarterbacking by pointing to that as something going on, or is it just? I
don't think so. I mean, I think it's pretty normal that if a writing staff changes hands from one person, like when SNL went from Seth Meyers to Colin Jost, there was a noticeable change in the entire scope of the show.
Right.
And I think that's similar here. Is that you can see there's a different style to it. It's a little more silly. It's not as there's some political stuff like the gun show. She did a lot of gun stuff. That was fun. But for the most part, the political stuff has been removed, and a lot of the cultural stuff has been removed, and then we just have a lot of this silliness now.
So. Sonia, what do you think?
I look forward to watching the next season. I reserve judgment until the new season.
So
I'll give it a chance.
Which I did go check. It was renewed for the 5th season, just the 5th season so far.
Okay. So that's what you get, podcast listeners. Wait until stuff is over. Sonia will get around to it. Then when she does, she'll talk about it then.
Daytime, nighttime, to get the right time, call Meridian 71212.
So for our last topic, we are doing another installment of our News You Can Use segment, Why Should I Listen to You?, where Sonia and I talk about our most and least favorite movies, and you see if our tastes are anything like yours, and if they are, listen to us when we tell you reviews, and if they're not, well then, screw you.
You can ignore us.
That's right. You can ignore us. It'll break our hearts, but you're just listening, so we'll never know anyway. So, this week we are talking about our favorite and least favorite. We're going to say that because there's no worst.
No.
Pixar movies. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about Finding Dory, which came out this weekend and made how much, Sonia Mansfield?
$136 million. It is the highest grossing animated movie. Biggest opening for an animated movie is what I meant.
Which is $136 million more than I have right now.
Same.
Which will be a surprise to no one, especially my banker. All right. So, Sonia, what is your favorite Pixar movie?
I was torn between two, Toy Story and The Incredibles, but I think ultimately I lean towards Toy Story.
Well, this is going to make our News You Can Use, Why Should I Listen to You segment very efficient, because my favorite is also the Toy Story trilogy.
Why is it your favorite?
Because it's just sweet. It's the sweetest little animated movie. It starts out small, the first one, this buddy story of two guys becoming friends. The second one was surprisingly good, really touching and looking at toys and found a new.
I can't get through the second one without crying.
Exactly. It is impossible for me to get through the third one without crying. Third Toy Story, the ending of the third Toy Story is just one of the most beautiful cinematic moments. Spoiler, these movies, obviously, feature toys. A kid Andy, he's got his toys. We see how how he grows up, and at the end of the third movie, he's going off to college and kind of dispersing his toys and his childhood possessions, and watching him disperse these characters that we've known by that point for 15 years and seen in different adventures and stuff is just, heartbreaking. It's, I almost call it kind of the Wrath of Khan effect, which is when Spock died at the end of Wrath of Khan. One of the things that made it so impactful is not only was it a good movie and a good story for that 2 hours, but you had spent, by that point, 15 years and 79 hours of programming with this character. So you could say that you've spent more time with this character than some people have spent with certain friends. So to watch that person die on screen was just like a punch in the gut. And Toy Story 3 is you're watching this kid that you've seen grown up. He's going to go out to high school. He's leaving all childish things behind, and it's just not only are you thinking about the toys and kind of from a character point of view what happens to all our favorite characters, but you're thinking about life and how people grow up, and in a weird way there's the specter of death coming way down, and it's just everything in human life kind of pivots off this moment with these plastic cowboy and spaceman toys, and it's just it's amazing.
I just really like it because I really like Tim Allen.
Well,
I think I really like Home Improvement, so
right.
I really like. Now I'm just lying.
Well,
no, it's because of the very things you said, and I think we all played with toys in theory, as when we were children, and at some point you do grow up and you have to move on, and it's so relatable. It's very easy to connect to those Toy Story movies.
Yes. Yeah. So they're fantastic. They're great. I think the Toy Story, Pixar, for a good 10-year stretch there, was doing something that I don't think any studio had done, which is they were putting out movie after movie after movie that was either a very, very good movie or an instant classic. Bang, right. One after another after another. No studio in Hollywood history had ever done it. And the Toy Story trilogy, I think, is their kind of culminating perfect thing. It's just, if it's one of those things. I have certain tripwires with people in movies where if you don't like this movie, we can still be friends, but I suspect that you don't like movies at all.
Yes.
You could say you don't like movies, but if you don't like, Toy Story 3...
Then I'm sorry about your cold, dead heart.
That's right. I'm sorry about your cold, dead heart, and you're lying to yourself when you say that you like movies.
Right.
And now you're lying to me, you bastard. How do friends do that? So, Sonia, what is your least favorite?
So now, let me just say...
This is going to be fun.
I don't hate any of these movies. I don't think they're terrible movies. I haven't seen a really bad Pixar movie. And I haven't seen all the Pixar movies.
What ones have you not seen?
I still have not seen Cars 2.
I'm digging you out of the hole that you haven't even finished digging yet.
I have not seen The Good Dinosaur. And what is the other one? There's one more. Cars 2, Good Dinosaur.
Monsters University?
Oh, no. I watched almost all of that one today.
Which one?
Monsters University. So I have seen that one.
And with that as setting the table, what is your least favorite Pixar movie?
I don't really connect with Ratatouille.
Spit it out! Oh, right. You just said it.
By the way, I don't think it's a bad movie. I just don't connect to it the way I do with other ones.
Yeah.
I really like the voices in it.
Mm-hmm.
I just... For some reason, it doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I really do like Ratatouille. And the thing that I love about Pixar and why I love that studio pretty much more than any other, even though lately it hasn't been batting at its same batting average, is sometimes it would make a movie like Toy Story where it's like, boom, That's a great movie right out of the gate. As you walk out of the theater, that is one of my favorite movies. That's an amazing thing. And then there are other movies, and for myself, I would put in Bug's Life, Finding Nemo, and Ratatouille, and kind of Up, where you walk out not loving it, but then you go back and revisit it, and it's like, oh, I like it more and more each time I see it.
For me, it's always just the first 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, I mean that first 15 minutes is
that's kind of what
sublime.
Puts Up, way up there.
Yeah,
for me,
exactly.
Because the rest of it, I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah,
I enjoy it. It's a good movie.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying, because I remember walking out of Finding Nemo and going, yeah, I liked it, but I don't know. And then every time I watch it, it's like more and more and more, and better and better and better. And it's just like, wow, these people are amazing.
Yeah. I have seen Finding Nemo a lot. Mm-hmm. I used to watch it with my niece a lot. I watched Toy Story a lot, and I watched The Incredibles a lot. And I think that's why those ones are higher up for me.
Yeah.
I will say right now, I have a 4-year-old boy. I watch Cars a lot. But Cars, I wouldn't put, up at the top. Yeah. So maybe if he really liked Ratatouille and I watched it a lot, maybe
that could
it would grow in esteem.
I do suspect that you would like Ratatouille the more you saw it. However, I think there's a movie that you would not like as much the more you saw it, and that is my least favorite movie, The Good Dinosaur.
So why don't you like it?
Because...
Or would you say, why is it your least favorite?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go so far as to say The Good Dinosaur is Pixar's first bad movie.
It's his first real big bomb, right?
I think I don't know how big a bomb it was, but I don't think it made its money back, which is
it didn't make its money up. It didn't make its money back. It made like $300 million.
Right.
But that's a bomb.
Yeah, it didn't. Well, that's the thing is it didn't make 25% of its money back or 50% of its money back like a lot of classic bombs do. But it didn't do that. It was just it was just fine. It's the story of a dinosaur that gets swept away from his family, connects up with a human kid, and it's on this strange alternate Earth where the meteor never killed off the dinosaurs, so humans kind of evolved next to dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are kind of the more advanced race, but they're not that advanced. This is like kind of medieval dinosaurs, or kind of like first settled settlements dinosaurs, where, yeah, they farm, but they don't really have cities, they don't have towns, they just have farms, and they're just, anyway. And then it's got this kind of interesting premise, but then it doesn't really go anywhere. It does the classic, oh, I don't like you and you don't like me, and I don't know you and you don't know me, and let's become, go through trial A, B, C, and D, and then we're going to get back to our families, and then, it's just, ugh.
The previews didn't do it. Like, I just couldn't bring myself to go see it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have a 4-year-old son. Maybe he would have liked it, but it just looked kind of boring, to be honest.
It was. I hate to say it.
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
The movie looks very nice, but the content of the movie looked very boring.
Yeah.
And when he didn't ask to see it, I was like, good.
Yeah. And that's the thing is with, it got all this press at the time. And actually, I was talking to somebody that went this weekend that went to one of the crew screenings for The Good Dinosaur. And he was talking to me about the process that they went through, because it has a semi-famous, tumultuous production history. And it is just meh. It started out as kind of, I guess, Amish dinosaurs or whatever, and it feels like the bad Disney cartoons of the late 90s, early 2000s, where you could almost see the story going through a committee and getting hammered from every side. So it doesn't, bad kids movies have this kind of, you expect the kid to be down and trodden at the beginning, and they set themselves a goal, and then they don't reach the goal, and then they feel bad, and there's kind of the stereotypical beats that a lot of kid stories go through, and this kind of goes through all that. And it's just, but it does look amazing. It looks nuts. It looks like one of the best Pixar movies, or one of the best animated movies ever made, but just the story is just not there.
Yeah.
But I think they've made 16 movies
right
so far, so 1 for 16 is better than still any other studio out there.
I have some friends who work for Pixar or have worked for Pixar, and they told me if you really want to make them angry, you could tell them how much you love the movie Planes.
Yeah, no, I suspect. Which is the Pixar brand on Planes?
I don't know. I think it's like very, very loosely connected. Like it was supposed to be somehow connected to Cars, right?
It is, yeah. I think it is, which makes sense. But
I think it's like a direct-to-video.
I think it is, yeah.
Right? Pixar
I
movie.
think it is. But, yeah. So, you know what? At some point, well, you know what? That ties us in a little bit to kind of one of the things that the detractors of Pixar have been talking about of late is they are starting to get sequelitis.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Finding Dory, the sequel to Finding Nemo that came out this weekend that I saw with my sons on Father's Day. And it's good. It's fine.
That'll go on the box. That'll go on the DVD cover.
That's right.
It's good. It's fine.
But it's
Christopher Allen Smith dorking out.
That's right. It's just not, like Finding Nemo was just, mwah! It was just, there was a spit and polish and perfection, polished perfection that the early Pixar movies had. And, with Monsters University and now with Finding Dory, even though I think Finding Dory is better than Monsters University, it's just, it's good. Basically, the premise is Dory, who suffers from short-term memory loss, as we all know from Finding Nemo, kind of has some flashes of her past life and decides she's going to go on a quest to find her parents. And it, in a weird way, and I think this is, in a way, kind of an echo of the success of Toy Story. The last half of the movie is a lot of fish and octopuses and running around the human world and trying to explain how a couple of fish who can't live out of water would make their way around a marine institute. The kind of a cross between the Monterey Bay Aquarium and, one of the smaller lands of Disneyland. That's kind of where they're trying to go around, and they're going on strollers, and they're going in buckets and sippy cups and tidal pools, and it's just, after a while, it's just, you can see the screenwriters trying to be very clever in how they do all this stuff, but a lot of it is just, I don't know, it's cranked, to call back to our Amy Schumer segment, it's cranked a little bit to 11 too much. And it's fun. It really is fun, and there's some really big laughs. But it's just not it's not great. It's good, but it's not great. And in a weird way, given Pixar's history, that's a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah.
So your mileage may vary.
I'll be seeing it on Saturday, so
I'll
report back to you.
Yeah, report back next week. Tell me what you think. Hopefully we'll have a big argument like we should have about Ratatouille, but I know that our listeners are going to let you have it as they should, so I'm going to step back, and I'm not going to add my boot to the neck.
Come at me, dorks.
That's right. Go get her, dorks. You know what to do. All right. I think that's it. I think we've done enough damage here. So, for Christopher Allen Smith and
Sonia Mansfield. You don't speak for me.
That's right.
Speak for me.
This has been episode X4 of Dorking Out. Hopefully the last of the test episodes, he said with his fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
We'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.